I thought it was about time I did a top 15 for my home park Tivoli Gardens. When this park is open, I tend to visit at least once a week, sometimes twice.
Get the life, nerd.
Usually because I work in Copenhagen and I actually walk by the park whenever I go to work. And so I know pretty much all the rides very well. There's only one ride in the entire park I pretty much refuse to ride, which is Tic Tac, just because of how I easily get nauseated by such rides. So today I'm gonna give you my top 15 of the rides in Tivoli Gardens here in Copenhagen of the currently operating rides. I also want to give a quick honorable mention to both Fata Morgana and Monsoon. Both of these rides are rides that some people probably expect to be in the top 15, but they're just not for me. Fata Morgana is just not very exciting for me. It very quickly gets boring, even though the views are of course good. It's just not worth it to ride this for me, and I never desire to.
Trash!
And of course, Monsoon was in the top 15 very recently. It did used to be one of my more favorite rides here at the park, because it is a very good ride. Unfortunately though, I've just started to get more and more nauseous every time I ride it by now, to the point where I just don't want to ride it. But it's still a really fun ride with some awesome forces. Starting off the official top 15, we have Chameleon, which is the kiddie coaster. I know this is just a super small Zero Force coaster, but it actually has some surprises up its sleeve. Not big surprises though. I mean, it has a little bunny hill, a little twisted bunny hill, which actually grants a little bit of airtime if you sit in the front or the back rows. The airtime is of course very weak, but this is just a fun kiddie coaster. It's not something boring. You do actually have a little bit of fun on it, especially if you ride it with friends. It is one of my more favorable kiddie coasters I've ridden. At number 14, we have Veteranbilerne, or the veteran cars. This is just an old, super classic, really nice ride that actually gets different throughout the year. It very much suits the theming of the season, so in the summer it just looks normal. In Christmas there's a bunch of fake snow and snowmen and lights and so on, and
it's beautiful!
This ride has the essence of just being classic and always being really nice to go on. At number 13 is Ballongung. Ballongung is their super old classic Ferris wheel. It opened back in the 1940s, and it's definitely one of my favorite Ferris wheels I've been on. First of all, it just feels classic. It's very old and it's very pretty as well, and it actually grants a very nice view. It is a very small Ferris wheel, but it gives a good view above the rest of the park, because the park is pretty small and you can definitely see Rutschebanen from a very good angle as well. This ride is also relatively fast, and the cars actually swing to a certain degree. So this is just, again, another super classic fun ride to go on. And number 12 is Svingkarussellen. I have a weakness for wave swingers, and most of the ones I've done are by Sierra. And like all wave swingers, it just brings a really nice rotation. It actually has a little bit of force as well that's really enjoyable, and the location is just fantastic. It's very hard to compare wave swingers with each other, but this is just one of the ones that feel right. The speed is good. You can rotate in a very fun way with your seat, of course, and again, the location is great. It's actually the same wave swinger that used to be in Folp Summerland. They used to switch between seasons, so Tivoli had it at Christmas and Folp had it at summer. Now Tivoli just has it all year round, and it's a great ride to go on. I really enjoyed this ride. At number 11, we have Glein. Glein is such a classic as well. It is definitely my favorite of these sort of Peter Pan style rides. It's incredibly old as well. It's from 1937, and it has such a charm. The theme itself is great. There's a bunch of beautiful lights and some good music. And the cars feel so awesome. They're these old wooden cars that have a certain shake and rattle to them that's just so charming. The ride goes so far up and down, and it manages to give some nice floater airtime. It's very weak floater, of course, but it is there. And it's constant laterals, and it's not uncomfortable at all. On some of these roundabouts, the laterals can be straight up painful. Cancer. But on this one, everything is just perfect. And it's pretty much a must whenever I visit. I love this ride. Starting off the top 10 is Radiobilerne. These are the classic bumper cars, and are actually my favorite bumper cars I've ever been on. A lot of people are going to disagree with me, but yeah, they're not the fastest bumper cars I've been on, but they do grant a solid bang if you drive directly into people or into the wall, of course. They're very modern as well. They don't have the classic electric net above them. They feel very good. They feel very controlled. And aside from the bumper car experience, I think my favorite part of this ride is the theme. I love the theme. It's basically themed to music. Again, the name is Radiobilerne, which just means bumper cars, but the direct translation of that is radio cars. So there's a bit of wordplay there in the theme, and it's honestly fantastic. Every car has its own music genre. It's always a game like, oh, which genre did you get? Oh, you know, M&A. I have a very big weakness for bumper cars, and this is just my favorite, just because of the overall package, how the theme is, and how the bumper cars themselves feel, and of course you can still smash each other pretty well. So honestly, very good ride. At number 9, we have Himmelskiebel. This is a fun time star flyer which scares the fucking shit out of me. Well, actually not that much anymore after I rode Eclipse. This is a ride that's all about height. Of course, it is basically like a wave swinger, but super fucking high. It's above 80 meters tall, so it is actually the tallest ride in Denmark. And it just grants such a wonderful view of not only the park, but Copenhagen as a whole. Of course, if you don't like heights, this is fucking frightening. And it definitely took me a while to get used to this as well, but it's just an overall great experience to go on this ride. At number 8 is Minen, the first dark ride of the list. Minen is a mock ride's dark water ride. It's one of the better dark rides in Denmark, and this is a shooting dark ride, but I don't necessarily always shoot, because it wasn't always a shooting dark ride. It has this awesome theme with a bunch of moles. And really good darkness with a bunch of jewels all around and a massive dragon. And there's just so many good details here. There's something to see everywhere, and it just gets better and better throughout the ride until you reach this massive room with a bunch of construction going on and a small drop where you think you're gonna get wet, but you're not actually gonna get wet, and it's a good overall dark ride. One really cool thing about Minen is that it's also inside the mountain of Rutsjebane, and because Rutsjebane has such good operations and it pretty much always has a train running, you will actually hear the trains from Rutsjebane run while you're riding Minen, and it makes like an earthquake noise inside the mountain, and it adds so much to the atmosphere as well. And this ride really just is all atmosphere. It's so good. There's an awesome jingle going through the entire ride. Such a childhood classic and such a nostalgic ride whenever I ride it. At number 7, we have Den Flyvende Kuffert, or the Flying Trunk. This ride is all but dedicated to Hans Christian Andersen, or a Danish author who of course wrote famous stories such as The Little Mermaid or The Ice Queen. This ride just tells a bunch of the classic super old fairy tales that the old author made with nice animatronics and good scene. It's made by Mock Rides, and it also goes up and down, the cars rotate. It's a super magical ride, and you even get some hang time, which is actually pretty fun. This is like a ride made for tourists who come here and want to see something about Danish culture.
It's kind of hot.
But even for me, who's ridden it so incredibly many times, I just enjoy it every single time I ride it. I've never gotten tired of this ride, especially because for me it also brings up a bunch of childhood classics. I used to read all these stories when I was little, or well, my mom read it to me, and all the scenes are just so beautiful and complete. And while I haven't been to a Disney park, there's just a little bit of me that says Disney about this. Now, this next spot was actually supposed to be to Odenexpassen, the old Mock Rides powered coaster, but of course that was replaced by the actual next spot, number 6, which is Mælkevejen. This is, of course, a Mock Rides Blauer Enzian, or a powered coaster. And in regards to layout, it's the best powered coaster I've ridden, because this powered coaster actually has some solid speed. It's even had its speed turned up since it first opened back in 2019. This is the ride that just has an awesome location that goes over the rest of the park, and the forces are not to be underestimated. It has some good speed and a little bit of positive forces in most of the turns, and of course some nice laterals. It has this massive helix that just grants a little bit of laterals and actually some pretty okay positive forces. Not very powerful, but very sustained. Some good zigzags with again some smooth laterals, and then there are the turns into and out of the station, which both grant some hardcore laterals. You get whipped into the station and you get whipped out of it again. It's awesome. It's also in this turn into the station you'll find the best positive forces. You'll find a photo here. Because it's in a tunnel and it goes downwards, you will get the greatest sense of speed here.
I'm fast.
This might just be a powered coaster, but it is incredibly fun. It's no thrill coaster at all, but it really does try to be thrilling for a powered coaster, which I very much appreciate. At number 5, we have Aquila. Now we're getting into the thrill department. Aquila is a Zamperla air race, and this ride is just all about hang time. While it's not necessarily the smoothest flat ride anymore, this ride is incredibly good at giving some nice rotations to give some awesome hang time. It can leave you upside down for a long time, or it can spin you fast around, also giving a bit of positive forces at the bottom. And it's one of those rides where you constantly just go, whoa! If you love hang time, this is the ride for you. For a guy like me who easily gets nauseous by spinning flat rides, this ride doesn't even do that. I mean, it's incredibly good at just doing what it does without sabotaging it. And number 4 is Villa Vendetta. This was the new ride last year in 2021, and this is their very own scare maze. They always open a scare maze every Halloween, which is only there for the Halloween season. That's over by Rutschebanen, but this one is over at the other end of the park, and this is a permanent scare attraction. And it is the best walkthrough attraction I have done. This walkthrough is not only incredibly well detailed, has some awesome theming and some awesome atmosphere, and just generally being perfect in that department, it is also hella fucking scary. You're supposed to walk in groups of 5 or 6 where you hold each other onto the shoulders. That's so no one runs away and so no one hits the actors when they scare you, and they are fucking scary. I think it's probably safe for me to tell you how they scare you because as far as I've been told, it's different. They're not in the same place every time. So even if you've been on it before, and I have only been on it once because it's an upcharge attraction, they will probably not be the same place the next time I go on it. It is frightening. There are some times where you go through doors or curtains hanging from the ceiling where you're just expecting someone to be there, but they're not there. It's super tense. This attraction really plays with your mind. This is the scariest ride I've ever done, but also the best scare attraction I've ever done. There are some scary rides that I don't like because they're just uncomfortably scary to the point where it's not fun, but this one is just a blast, especially when you go with friends. The attraction and the actors, all of it is just fantastic. At number 3, we have the Gyllene Tårn. This is an SNS turbo drop, and it's probably the worst of the large drop towers I've done, but I still really like this ride. I have an absolute weakness for drop towers, and the good thing about this ride is, of course, as all drop towers, what it does is it takes you up to a certain height and then it drops you. And for this ride being in central Copenhagen, is just awesome. And the drop itself is not hella forceful at all. It's one of the weaker drops on the drop tower I've done, but it's insanely snappy. So you definitely do still get that snap, that adrenaline rush, and a quick pop of airtime. You don't stay out of your seat like on an Intamin or a Fabri drop tower, but the snap itself is great mixed with the awesome views. It feels wrong to have a ride like this high above something like Villa Vendetta, but I just can't help it. At number 2 is Dæmonen. This is their B&M floorless coaster. It's actually the only Danish B&M. It's also the worst B&M I've been on. I've been on 7 B&Ms and this is the weakest one of them, but still it's a really good ride. I personally love this coaster because it's just a really nice and honestly super enjoyable ride to go on. It's not super intense. Its positive G-forces are not really there. The positive forces that are there are really nice, but they're of course very short, and that's part of why it's not super intense. It's also not super whippy or lateral based, so all the forces are kind of weak, but it feels fast, and the elements are still good. I actually really like the main drop in the back row, and the 0G roll is always fun. The bottom of the loops is where you can get some positive forces. There's actually a fun whippy twist with some airtime following right after it at the end. Even though it's not that intense, you still feel like you're riding a thrill coaster. You gotta go through some awesome inversions. Well, not awesome. I mean, the loop and Immelman are both pretty fucking lackluster. But still, I mean, while it might be an underwhelming thrill coaster, as a ride in the park, it is one of the standout attractions. And even for an enthusiast like myself, it feels like it. And I hope they never remove it. Of course, at number 1, we have Rutschebanen. This is Europe's oldest roller coaster and the 3rd oldest in the world. It's an old LA Thompson Scenic Railway. And what is there to say that I have not said about this coaster plenty of times before? The atmosphere is fantastic. It has, of course, this alpine theme with the awesome mountains you go in and out of. And of course, it feels so classic. It's probably the most classic ride I've ever been on. It's just super smooth for its age. It does not feel like it's 108 years old, but it is.
You just can't wait for me to die, can you?
It's been maintained so insanely well. It's smooth. It just wiggles from side to side because the cars kind of wiggle themselves, almost like a suspended coaster would. And if you're in the very front row, on the very back row, you're gonna get some awesome airtime. In the front row, you can get some quick ejector pops, but in the back row, all the drops are just gonna be incredibly good. While it's not the strongest airtime, it's so sustained and the lap bar is so loose that you're gonna get some awesome standing airtime. The amount of distance you can gain from your seat doing those drops is immensely awesome. I've even tried riding it without restraints a few times, and that is just insane, both in the front and the back row. You can see on this POV just how much airtime I get in the front row. It is a masterpiece. Now, finally, I of course want to mention what my favorite ride in the park used to be, which was Vertigo. This is just the most intense ride I've ever been on. It's a masterpiece of a flat ride. It does pretty much anything. Laterals, airtime, positive forces, it's got it all. And those positive forces were fucking insane. It was 5 Gs at the bottom of these loops and 3 Gs at the top, and it just kept going at 100 kilometers an hour. The spinning itself was also super intense, and I mean, this ride was just unreal. I'm gonna miss this ride so incredibly much, and it's one of the best rides I've ever been on. That does it for this surprisingly long top 15 rides of Tivoli Gardens. Let me know what you think and what your ranking in the comments are, or maybe just what you expect. Do you want to go here someday?
I'm not fucking leaving!
Thank you so much for watching, guys. Let me know if you want to see something else with Tivoli Gardens. It is my home park, so I know a few things. Otherwise, bye!